everything with just a single evening? Today, we're diving into a story about second chances, quiet love, and the kind of connection that grows where we least expect it. Let's begin. The Seattle sky on New Year's Eve hung heavy with fine mist, rain falling like silk threads against the glass of the high-rise. Warm golden lights from the city shimmered through the fog, the world below quiet in anticipation of midnight. Inside the elevator, its steel walls polished to a mirror finish, Lucas Bennett caught his reflection and adjusted his tie, a motion born more of habit than need. The fluorescent glow washed over his face, angular, reserved, and weary in the way that only long silence can make a man. 7 years had passed since his brother Caleb died. 7 years of Lucas burying himself in blueprints and concrete, designing homes for strangers while failing to rebuild anything within himself. At 40, they called him a brilliant architect, but he knew better. He was a man who had carefully constructed walls too high for anyone to scale, including himself. "It's just a date," he muttered, recalling Theo's cheerful insistence that a blind dinner on New Year's Eve might be just the kind of chaos he needed. The elevator doors slid open. A wave of candlelight and the faint scent of orange blossom spilled out from the restaurant Arden. Lucas stepped forward, unaware that tonight, unlike any building he'd ever designed, he was about to be rebuilt from the ruins he'd long believed untouchable. Lucas was led to a window-side table, where the city lights shimmered over the still surface of Lake Union. He sat down, his palms slightly trembling as he accepted a glass of wine from the waiter. Outside, a clock chimed 9. 3 hours left of the old year, and 3 hours for something new to begin. He had nearly convinced himself to leave when the restaurant doors opened. Maya Thompson entered like a quiet current moving through a carefully composed scene. Her wine-red dress hugged her slender figure, her natural curls swept into an elegant updo, and her gaze, oh that gaze, was gentle but unshakable, as if she never needed to try to command attention. Lucas wasn't prepared for that moment. It was as though all the air had been pulled from his lungs, and yet, somehow, he was filled again with something warmer, unfamiliar, quietly hopeful. Their eyes met. Maya smiled, and the world around Lucas seemed to hush. She approached, pulled out a chair, and extended a hand. "Lucas Bennett." Her voice was low, soft, with a hint of mischief. "That's me." Lucas stood too quickly, nearly knocking over his wine. "Maya? Lovely to meet you," she said, her voice reminding him of old books on crisp autumn days, unadorned, layered, sincere. The first few minutes passed with polite hesitance. They ordered their meals. She chose walnut-crusted salmon. He opted for red wine-braised short ribs. They spoke of weather, work, the city, safe topics, civil exchanges. But there was something in the way Maya told a story, in the way her eyes listened, that made Lucas begin to lower his guard. She didn't press, didn't pry, but her presence, steadfast and undemanding, made him want to open up. "So," Maya asked, sipping her wine, a playful spark in her eye, "why agree to a blind date on New Year's Eve?" Lucas chuckled, a real, unguarded laugh. "Because my best friend's incredibly persistent," he said, "and because, if there's ever a time to start over, it's when a year comes to an end." Dinner passed like a gentle stream, unhurried, quiet, yet full of unexpected turns. Lucas was surprised by how much he found himself laughing. Maya had a way of telling stories that was vivid but unpretentious, each detail painting something far bigger than the words themselves. When dessert arrived, a slice of almond cake with vanilla ice cream, Maya leaned back slightly in her chair, her gaze softening with something quieter. "Have you ever lost someone, Lucas?" Her question came like a breeze, but it landed like a stone on his chest. Lucas hesitated, 1 beat, then 2. "My brother," he said, his voice dipping low. "Caleb. Car crash. 7 years ago." Maya didn't press. She only nodded slowly, as if listening not just to what he said, but also to what he didn't. "We argued that day," Lucas continued. "I told him he was reckless, that he lived like he had forever to waste, and then," he swallowed, "I ignored his call when he tried to call me back." Silence settled over them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Maya reached out and gently placed her hand over his, just a touch, but Lucas felt something melt open in his chest. "My husband," Maya said softly. "Elijah. 3 years ago. Aneurysm. No warning. He collapsed after class." Lucas looked at her, heart twisting. "Were you angry?" "No," she shook her head. "Just sad. We had so many things left unsaid, all the little dreams we thought we could save for later." They sat like that, in silence. But it wasn't a silence meant to hide. It was a silence meant to understand. They had come to this dinner as strangers, but now, as the old year edged closer to its end, Lucas realized they weren't strangers anymore. 2 weeks after that New Year's Eve, Lucas and Maya met for the 4th time, this time at a small bookshop in Capitol Hill. It was Maya's own store. The space smelled of old wood and faint coffee, with floor-to-ceiling shelves and a reading nook bathed in soft winter light through frosted windows. Lucas had brought sketches of a small art studio, something Maya was considering building behind the store. They sat tucked into a corner, sipping tea and talking like old friends. Maya shared stories of her childhood in Vermont, snow-laden winters, icy walks to school under leafless trees, and her grandmother, Cora James, a woman with a voice like oak and a heart always working for others. "She used to live in this pale yellow house right on Maple Street," Maya said. "There was a crash outside her house when I was in high school. A car hit an oak tree. She ran out, wrapped a quilt around the boy, and prayed with him until the ambulance came." Lucas, mid-sip, froze. His hand gripped the arm of the chair. "An oak tree?" he echoed. "On Maple Street? Vermont?" Maya nodded slowly. Lucas pulled out his phone. In an old photo from the accident file, the street sign was visible. Maple Street, Brattleboro, BT. His heart pounded. "My brother, Caleb. That's where he died." His voice trembled. The car hit an oak tree in front of a yellow house. The air between them went still. Maya covered her mouth. Her eyes fluttered as she slowly lowered her hand. "You said his name was Caleb?" Lucas nodded. "My grandmother still talks about him," Maya whispered. "She called him the boy with the quiet eyes. She never knew his name, but she always wondered if he survived, if someone in his family ever knew he wasn't alone that night." Lucas closed his eyes. "I have a yellow quilt at home. It was in Caleb's personal effects. I always assumed it came from the hospital, but it's thick, hand-stitched, trimmed with gray yarn, and it smells faintly of lavender, just like the one your grandmother described." A long silence stretched between them, but this time it felt sacred. Maya gently touched his hand. "Lucas, we need to go see her. I think she's been waiting to hear the rest of that night's story." Returning from Vermont, Lucas felt something had shifted deep within him, not the erasure of grief, but the first time he could look at it without turning away. The note Cora had written years ago, a memory she once called a witness to love, was now carefully framed on a shelf beside an old photo of Caleb, not as an altar, but as a reminder. There are moments we don't witness, yet we can still believe in them, because love doesn't require physical presence to be real. In Maya's little bookstore, Lucas's sketches of the art studio covered one corner of the wall. She had made it official. The space behind the shop would become a haven for young artists in the community, a place for emotion to be expressed and healed. "We're building something," Maya said one late afternoon as they rearranged books on the shelves, "not just for us, but for people like Caleb, like Elijah, the ones who gave us reasons to live fully." Lucas looked at her, the golden hour casting warm light over her curls. "I used to think life was about building something solid, but now I see the most important things we build are the ones we can't touch. Connections." Maya smiled, softly, deeply. And just like that, they weren't just beginning a new chapter. They were rewriting what it meant to be brave. Spring arrived early that year in Seattle. The gentle rain was no longer bitter cold, but carried the scent of damp soil, waking up every sprouting leaf behind Maya's little bookstore. The garden, once a patch of mint and lavender, had been transformed into an open sanctuary, redesigned by Lucas's own hands. Nothing extravagant, just pebble paths, native flowers, and a single wooden bench placed at the center, facing the afternoon sun. Etched by hand into the back of the bench were the words, "For those still carrying love." That day, Lucas and Maya sat quietly on the bench, hand in hand. From the nearby street, the laughter of children echoed like music. A soft breeze swept through the garden, bringing with it the scent of herbs, old books, and something unnamed, like a whispered thank you from those who had once grieved and were now learning to live again. "I think Caleb would have loved this place," Lucas said softly, eyes on the budding trees. Maya nodded. And so would Elijah. They both believed in the beauty the world often forgets. Lucas turned to her, the woman who didn't try to replace his loss, but reminded him that a heart can beat again if we're brave enough to open it. They sat there for a long time, saying nothing more, letting the silence do its work. They had both lost, but now, in this small garden that belonged to no one, yet welcomed everyone, they were rebuilding with love, memory, and gratitude. Behind them stood a bookstore. Ahead, new paths yet to walk. And in between it all, there was a garden. Spring didn't begin with fireworks or a dramatic kiss. It began quietly, with a mug of tea left on the table, with a look that needed no explanation, with fingertips brushing, like two people learning how to exist beside each other again. Maya and Lucas never planned their love. They let it grow the way their garden did day by day, with light, with rain, and with space for silence. In June, Lucas moved in with Maya. The apartment above the bookstore was modest, but full of shared routines, warm lights, quiet laughter. They converted the spare room, once used to store old books, into Lucas's writing studio. The desk faced the garden. The morning light spilled in like permission. Lucas began to write, not chapters, not yet, just scattered thoughts, memories, fragments that refused to stay buried. Maya didn't ask questions. She just left tea at his side, folded a soft blanket over the back of his chair, and let him wander into words at his own pace. One July evening, he looked up from his keyboard and found her curled on the sofa, reading. "I'm writing a book," he said, voice barely above a whisper. She looked up, a quiet smile playing on her lips. "I figured," she said, "but I didn't know it would be our story." "It's not fiction," he continued. "It's our story of Caleb, Elijah, your grandmother, of what we lost and what remained and what grew." Maya closed her book gently, her eyes holding something deeper than tears. "Write it," she whispered, "and don't skip a single chapter." By the time autumn painted the trees amber and gold, they invited Cora to move in. The decision didn't feel like a gesture of care. It felt inevitable, like roots seeking soil. Cora chose the downstairs bedroom, the one closest to the garden. Every morning she brewed tea, 3 cups, one of jasmine, one of mint and ginger, and one special blend with lemon balm and honey, which she called tea for when the heart needs gentleness. The house became a home, not because it held 3 generations, but because each person carried love, memory, and healing into every room they touched. Winter arrived early, laying a soft layer of snow across the garden beds and wooden railings. One quiet morning, Maya placed a small white box on the kitchen counter. She didn't speak. Lucas walked in, saw the box, opened it, and froze. 2 pink lines? A pregnancy test. Maya stood still, her hands curled at her sides, her breath barely there. Lucas stared at the test, then at her. And something inside him gave way. Not with words, but with tears. He didn't say congratulations. He didn't say, "I'm so happy." He simply fell to his knees, pressed his forehead against her stomach, and whispered, "Thank you for giving me back hope." He walked to her, wrapped her in his arms, pressed his face to her neck, and whispered, "Thank you." Time moved like a spring stream, quiet, sure, unstoppable. As Maya's belly began to round, the garden shifted again. Lucas finished the final draft of his manuscript in early March. It was the first full novel he'd ever completed. He titled it The Quiet Light, a tribute to the way Caleb had left the world, quiet, humble, but full of grace that still lingered. 1 year after the garden was completed, in April, Maya gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. Cora called them a heart divided in two, half Caleb, half Elijah. The boy was named Caleb, after the brother who had taught Lucas how to love again. The girl was named Eliah, a soft echo of Elijah, the man Maya had lost but never buried, the love she had honored by opening herself again. One clear spring morning, sunlight spilled into the backyard like a slow blessing. Cora sat on the garden bench, gently rocking 2 baby swings. The twins giggled, reaching toward the sky. Maya stood in the doorway, Lucas beside her, their hands intertwined. They didn't speak. They watched, eyes filled with the quiet awe that words could never capture. Maya squeezed his hand, and Lucas knew they hadn't just built a garden or a home. They had rebuilt themselves. A garden once filled with memory was now blooming with possibility. "I think Caleb would love this," Lucas whispered. "And Elijah would be smiling," Maya said. Inside, the manuscript sat bound in a leather cover, resting on the shelf beside a quilted frame of their first ultrasound. On the first page, in simple black ink, was the dedication, "For the ones we lost, and the ones who helped us find ourselves again." If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need a little light today. And tell me, have you ever had a moment that quietly changed your life? Drop it in the comments below. Until next time, keep feeling, keep healing. This is Noah Stories.